America 250, The Dogs, Episode 7, Sallie and Jarrett. Welcome to America 250, The Dogs. February 6, 1865. Hatcher's Run, Virginia. Bullets filled the air. Smoke drifted across the battlefield. Men fought for their lives. And yet, in the middle of combat, several soldiers did something almost unthinkable. They laid down their weapons. Not because they had surrendered, not because they had been ordered to stop, but because one of their own had fallen, and she needed to be buried. Her name, Sallie Ann Jarrett, and she was a dog. This is her story. Sallie Ann Jarrett wasn't born into history. She was born around 1861, just as the United States was beginning to tear itself apart. She was a bull terrier, small, compact, muscular, a dog built with determination far larger than her size. In May of that year she was given to Captain William R. Terry of Company I, 11th Pennsylvania Infantry. The gift came from a resident of West Chester, Pennsylvania, where the regiment was training at Camp Wayne. At that point, the men were still preparing for war, still learning what military life would require, still unaware of what lay ahead. And so was Sallie. The soldiers named her Sallie Ann Jarrett, partly after a young woman they admired, partly after Fan Jarrett, one of the regiment's original commanders. It was a human name, personal, familiar. And from the beginning, she belonged not to one man, but to the entire regiment. When the soldiers moved out, Sallie moved with them. At first, she was simply a puppy among soldiers. But that didn't last long. As the men trained, Sallie learned their routines, their schedules, their movements, their habits. What began as drills for the soldiers became instinct for her. When they marched, she marched. When they stopped, she stopped. When they formed ranks, she took her place nearby, not wandering, not distracted, present, watching. The regiment became her world. And as training gave way to deployment, Sallie followed them beyond Camp Wayne and into the uncertainty of war. The roads stretched for miles. The weather shifted from heat to rain to dust. The men adjusted to military life, and Sallie kept pace, day after day, step for step. Somewhere along those roads, she stopped being a mascot and became part of the regiment itself. War is often remembered through battles, but soldiers spend far more time waiting than fighting, and it was in camp that Sallie truly became theirs. When the men settled in, she settled in too. She moved freely among tents and campfires. She knew the faces, the voices, the smells, and she knew who belonged. Accounts from the regiment describe a dog that was affectionate with her soldiers, but deeply suspicious of strangers. Anyone outside the 11th Pennsylvania received careful scrutiny. She watched quietly, patiently. If someone approached too closely, she let them know exactly what she thought. A low growl, a warning, a reminder that she was paying attention. At night, When the camp quieted and darkness settled in, Sallie stayed close, near the men, near the line, always aware of movement behind the firelight. And during the day, as soldiers drilled, rested, and carried out daily routines, Sallie remained nearby, watching, waiting, present. In a world becoming increasingly uncertain, she became something reliable, a constant. And for men living through war, that mattered more than they probably realized at the time. Then came combat. The controlled routines of camp disappeared. The noise was no longer practice. The danger was no longer theoretical. Gunfire, smoke, confusion, shouting, fear, and through it all Sallie stayed. The regiment fought at Cedar Mountain, Second Bull Run, Antietam, Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, Gettysburg, the Wilderness, Petersburg, battle after battle, year after year. Witnesses describe Sallie as remarkably composed, not panicked, not frantic, focused, watching, moving when the regiment moved, stopping when it stopped, as if she somehow understood where she belonged. This wasn't camp anymore. This wasn't routine. This was war. And still she didn't leave, because Sallie didn't understand military strategy. She didn't understand politics. She didn't understand the conflict. She understood the men, and that was enough. As the war continued, Sallie became more than a camp dog. She became part of the regiment's identity. The soldiers expected her to be there, on the march, in camp, on the battlefield, and nowhere was that loyalty more clearly displayed than at Gettysburg. July 1st, 1863. The first day of fighting. The Union line broke. The 11th Pennsylvania was forced to retreat toward Cemetery Hill. The battlefield dissolved into confusion. Amid the chaos, Sallie disappeared. The men assumed the worst. They believed she had been killed, left behind during the retreat. But Sallie had not fled. She had stayed. Back on Oak Ridge, where the regiment had fought and fallen, Sallie remained among the wounded and dead. Days later, members of the regiment returned and found her there, still standing watch, still guarding the men she considered her own. She didn't understand retreat. She didn't understand tactical withdrawal. She understood loyalty, and she stayed. The war took its toll on everyone. Sallie was no exception. At the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse in 1864, a bullet struck her in the neck. She survived. The regimental surgeon treated the wound. The bullet remained lodged in her body for a time before eventually working its way out. And even then she stayed with the regiment, through exhaustion, through hardship, through loss, until February 6, 1865, Hatcher's Run. The battle that opened our story. Gunfire echoed across the field, smoke drifted through the trees, and a bullet found Sallie. This time she did not survive. What happened next became one of the most enduring stories of the Civil War. Several soldiers of the 11th Pennsylvania Infantry stopped fighting under enemy fire. They laid down their weapons, and they buried her right there on the battlefield immediately. Not because she was a mascot, not because she was a novelty, but because she was theirs. In a war where men were often left where they fell, they refused to leave Sallie behind. The Civil War ended only a few months later, but Sallie's story did not. Years afterward, surviving veterans returned to Gettysburg. They gathered to remember, to honor, to preserve the memory of what they had experienced. In 1890, the regiment dedicated a monument on the Gettysburg battlefield, a granite pedestal, a bronze soldier standing above, and at the base of the monument sits Sallie, cast in bronze, watching, guarding, present, exactly where she had always been. Not behind the men, not beneath them, but among them. Sallie Ann Jarrett never held a military rank. She never carried a weapon. She never chose a side. She never understood the politics that tore a nation apart. But she stayed. Through marches, through battles, through years that broke men physically and emotionally, she remained. Not because she was ordered to, but because she belonged. And when the war ended, the soldiers did not remember her as a mascot. They remembered her as one of their own. Because even in the middle of division, even in the middle of war, even in the middle of everything that tried to pull people apart, that bond endured. Thank you for listening to America 250, The Dogs. Join me next time as we continue exploring the dogs that lived through America's greatest challenges and helped shape its history. Because as this nation fought itself, its people were never truly alone. Because then, as now, we were a pack. I'm Andrea LaGrow, and I'll see you next time.